Hi everybody and welcome back. Today I want to talk to you about hormones. This is one of my passions, my favorite subjects that I love to talk about. It's where I started my career 20 years ago and where I still find all my passion today is on hormones. So I'm going to try to make what seems like a complicated subject very easy for you to understand, because I want you to know that our hormonal system is like a symphony. And if one area of hormones is out, then that means the rest of our body is out of play and out of balance as well. So I always think it's super important for you to understand where these hormones come from and how they play and interplay with one another. So basically, what's a hormone, right? So a hormone is a body's messenger that aids in communicating between all of our organ systems, its normal functioning ability and process. So there's three types of hormones. There's a protein, a steroid, and then there's a tyrosine-based hormone. So protein is where most of our body's hormones are, and these are secondary messengers, things like insulin. Steroids are our primary messengers, and these come from our lipids or our cholesterol. So I always get super concerned when people talk about making sure your cholesterol levels are below 100, because when that happens, we can't make hormones anymore. And that becomes a big problem for men and women if we're suppressing that cholesterol too low and we're not able to make those hormones. And then our third derived hormone is a tyrosine hormone. This comes from our thyroid gland, and this is a catecholamine that is derived from the adrenal medulla, which is our fight or flight, and it creates epinephrine. So in another video that I did, we talked about this fight or flight system, and then I also gave you a bonus video inside the modules here that you'll see later on all about thyroid. So I'm not going to focus a lot of attention on those two areas, but we will focus a little bit on them. So if our hormones come from these sources, how do we actually get them? Well, they're part of our endocrine system. And our endocrine system is basically a series of glands that secrete chemical messengers called hormones. They start in the brain with what I love to call the diva of the hormonal system. This is your hypothalamus and your pituitary gland, and this is where they control everything from the very beginning. And then they send messages to the thyroid, they send messages to the ovaries or the testes, and they send messages to the adrenal glands. And so they are the messengers to our organs to produce all of these hormones for us. So when we're signaling those organs to produce hormones, everything should work really well, right? Well, sometimes it doesn't. And so when the hypothalamus is creating something called ADH, or antidiuretic hormone, this makes another hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is the love hormone. It's what makes us feel like we want to connect to our babies. It's what makes us want to breastfeed. But what happens if we lose oxytocin? Now we don't have that ability to connect with people. We don't feel passionate and love and connection. And so that can create a lot of problems for us. Well, the hypothalamus receives a signal from the pituitary gland, known as the nervous system. And that pituitary gland is just a pea-sized gland that is known as the master gland. It also produces something called LH and FSH. This is what helps us get our period. And when we lose FSH when we're older, this is what puts us into menopause, okay? Now the pituitary also sends a direct signal to the thyroid gland, and that's what regulates our body's metabolism. The thyroid gland has to communicate with the parathyroid gland, which are small glands that sit on top of or on the sides of the thyroid. And calcium is really needed for bone growth and muscle contraction, but it's also needed to control the parathyroid glands as well. Now, the adrenal glands are two small glands that sit on top of your kidneys, and they give you that fight or flight response. They produce cortisol to get you through those stressful responses, and then they retreat and they rejuvenate again, okay? So when the body's ability, the hypothalamus and the pituitary communicate to these adrenal glands, they produce steroid hormones. And in some parts of the adrenal glands, they produce something called a catecholamine. So the steroids are actually the cortisol that they produce, and the catecholamines are things like epinephrine and norepinephrine. This is our adrenaline, what we get for that fight or flight response. Now, when we produce some steroid hormones, you can be susceptible to having increased fluid retention. And if you're producing the wrong amounts of cortisol, it can make you more susceptible to infection as well. So let's take a little bit closer look at what is produced by the ovaries, okay? So the ovaries get their signal to produce estradiol, estrone, and estriol. These are our three main forms of estrogen that the body produces. Primarily when we are premenopausal and in our younger years, and we're trying to produce children, we're going to make more of a hormone called estradiol. That is your strongest estrogen. That's what controls your hot flashes and your night sweats. Once you're postmenopausal, you're going to make more of a hormone called estrone. Estrone is known as your bad estrogen, and we don't really want a lot of that type of estrogen present in the body because it triggers risk factors for breast cancer and cardiovascular disease. So we want to try to avoid that form of estrogen as much as possible. And then estriol is a weaker estrogen. It's not great at controlling hot flashes and night sweats and things like that, but it's much better at treating or protecting the heart and the breasts from a variety of disease states that we have. And then you're also going to be signaled to get progesterone, which helps us make a nice thick lining in the uterus for implantation to carry a pregnancy. And it also signals the body for us to shed that lining when we're not pregnant, so we get a period. Now, progesterone is our very calming, very euphoric hormone. If we don't have a lot of that, we tend to be more irritable and moody. And this is what triggers a lot of the PMS-like symptoms that women suffer from. And PMS is not a normal problem. We shouldn't be suffering from PMS. However, in our community, we make it sound like every woman has PMS and that's normal. It's really not. If your hormones are balanced properly, you shouldn't be suffering from PMS-like symptoms really at all. Maybe a little cramping or a little bloating, but that's about it. It shouldn't be this moodiness and irritability and headaches and hunger and all of that. That shouldn't be present for us if our hormones are well balanced. So let's talk about what can we do to change some of those PMS symptoms that people suffer from, right? Well, we can do regular exercise 3 to 5 times a week. Eating a healthy, well-balanced diet can help. And then what we also recommend is lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, decreasing your salt and sugar intake, decreasing caffeine and alcohol. I know I'm making this sound so horrible, right? I'm making you give up all your things. But this really makes a big difference for women who suffer from PMS. Adequate sleep and rest is really important. Good, healthy spring water is all really great. And then there are some herbal things that we can do too to help balance the hormones. So what actually causes this disruption of hormones to occur in our body in the first place? Well, prolonged stress, that can be a big issue. The adrenal glands producing the wrong amount of cortisol, the wrong amount of adrenaline and epinephrine and norepinephrine all can create issues. Thyroid imbalance or the metabolism of the thyroid's not working properly can cause us to have other hormonal imbalances as well, because we're not going to signal things back to the hypothalamus and pituitary the way we want to. That's going to create some issues for us as well. Candida, which is an overgrowth of yeast, that can cause us to have false estrogen levels. So it can signal the body to reduce its own ability to produce estrogen. And then the elevated estrogen levels that are there can feed that candida and cause more problems for us and make you have something like a estrogen mimicking property to it. So you really can have symptoms of not enough estrogen and too much estrogen together. So there are some ways that we can balance hormones easier and naturally. One of the ways is to avoid all of the white food products, including alcohol. Supplement with omega-3s. Steer clear of commercial vegetable oils, peanut oil, canola oil, corn oil, soybean oil, that kind of thing. Limit your caffeine intake. Eat avocados and coconut. Those are great. Do what you can to reduce your stress level. Take vitamin D supplements, increase your fiber, increase your fruits and vegetables, increase your exercise and activity, and recognize that there are a lot of hormone disruptors, which we'll talk about in other videos as well, right in our bathroom cabinets. It's our hair products, it's our facial products, it's our lotions and our potions that we use. These things have parabens and phthalates and bisphenol A's and all kinds of things that mimic that estrogen to be produced in the wrong amounts at the wrong time. Consider weaning off of any kind of synthetic hormones. I think this is a really important thing because these are all going to disrupt and throw your hormone function off as well. So I know this was a quick video on hormones. We can do another video in here as well, but I wanted to give you the basis of hormones and how they're made and what they do so that you have a little bit better understanding when we start talking about hormonal tests and supplementation, that you understand where some of these come from. And I'll shoot another video for you on the various symptoms that people get from the hormonal imbalance. Thank you guys. Have a fantastic day.